The land was dying. The wind swept across the plains, hot and dry as a forge, carrying with it the taste of dust and loss. The sky had turned a faded white, the kind that never promised rain anymore. Along a lonely dirt road, a thin figure trudged forward, a woman with tangled hair, her dress faded to the color of ash. In her arms she carried a small bundle wrapped in a torn shawl, and two barefoot children stumbled behind her, their faces streaked with sweat and dirt. Her name was Clara Whitmore, though she hadn't heard anyone speak it kindly in months. Once she'd lived on a small patch of land with her husband, Samuel, and their two children, Eli and Lila. The farm had been modest but alive, corn swaying in the breeze, laughter spilling from the porch and a man's voice singing in the fields. But that was before the fever took Samuel in 3 burning nights. Before the rain stopped coming, before the debts piled up like tombstones. Now the farmhouse was gone, the fields dust, and the world reduced to this, one foot in front of the other, with nothing but survival in mind. Clara's lips were cracked, her throat raw from thirst. Each step felt like it drew blood from her soles. Eli, just 7, tried to be brave, keeping his little sister's hand tight in his. "Mama," he whispered, "my tummy hurts." Clara stopped, kneeling beside them both. Her hands trembled as she brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. "I know, baby," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "We'll find something soon." But she didn't know if she believed that anymore. The world was cruel to the poor, and the frontier even more so. Every farmhouse she'd passed in the last week had turned her away. Doors closed, eyes averted. "We got our own mouths to feed," they said, and she couldn't blame them. Hunger had no mercy, not even for children. By midday, the sun hung high and merciless. Clara's knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, clutching her daughter close. The little girl whimpered weakly, her face pale beneath the grime. Clara pressed her cheek against her child's hair and whispered, "Please, Lord, just one kind soul." But the only answer was the cry of a distant hawk. The road stretched empty ahead, wavering in the heat. Her body ached, her mind drifted toward darkness. She thought of Samuel's last words. "Keep them safe, Clara, promise me." She had promised, but promises didn't fill empty stomachs. She felt the children's weight pulling her down, and a desperate thought crossed her mind. Maybe they'd be better off without her. Maybe someone stronger, someone with food and land, could give them a chance. Her vision blurred. The sound of hoofbeats reached her ears, faint at first, then growing louder. She looked up, squinting into the sun. A horse approached from the horizon, its rider a tall figure in a wide-brimmed hat. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who'd never gone hungry. Clara tried to stand, but her legs failed her. The world spun. The horse stopped a few feet away, kicking up a swirl of dust. The man dismounted, boots hitting the ground, spurs glinting in the light. His shadow fell across her and the children. Clara's breath caught. She couldn't make out his face clearly through the haze, but she saw his coat, fine leather, the kind only the wealthy wore. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then as her knees gave way, Clara whispered through trembling lips barely audible, "Sir, please take my children." The words hung in the hot, still air, a plea born not of weakness, but of a mother's final strength. And though she didn't yet know it, that desperate whisper would change the course of all their lives forever. The rider froze where he stood. The woman before him, sunburnt, trembling, half-collapsed in the dirt, had just whispered something he couldn't quite believe. "Sir, please take my children." Her voice was little more than a breath, but it carried the weight of heartbreak he'd never heard before. He took a slow step closer, his boots crunching the dry earth. The woman's head was bowed, her hair tangled and full of dust. 2 small children clung to her skirts, a boy and a girl, both too thin, their eyes too large for their faces. The boy tried to stand between his mother and the stranger, his small jaw clenched in a brave but futile gesture. The man's name was Bo Callahan, ranch owner, horse breeder, and one of the wealthiest men in the county. He'd come down this road to inspect a new shipment of cattle, not to find 3 souls half dead from the sun, but now he couldn't make himself turn away. He crouched down, the leather of his coat creaking softly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and steady, "you need help." "Where are you headed?" Clara tried to answer, but her throat was too dry. Her cracked lips trembled. "Nowhere left," she rasped. "Please, just the children." They don't deserve this. Bo looked at her, really looked, and felt something inside him shift. He'd seen struggle before. The frontier had no shortage of pain, but there was something different about this woman's eyes, hollow with exhaustion yet fierce with love. She was a mother trying to give away her heart to save it. He turned his gaze toward the children. The little girl's head rested on her mother's lap, eyes half closed from hunger. The boy's hand gripped her dress with all the strength he had left. Bo reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen, kneeling down to hand it over. "Here," he said quietly. Clara hesitated, then took it with shaking hands. She lifted it to her daughter's lips first, letting the child drink before she took a sip herself. The boy drank last, too polite to take more than a mouthful. Bo watched them, his throat tightening in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Where's your husband?" he asked gently. "Gone," Clara whispered. "Fever took him." Then the farm. The debt collectors came. We walked as far as we could. Bo looked toward the empty road behind her, miles of wasteland with no end in sight. He didn't ask how long they'd been walking. He could tell from the way her shoes were worn to threads, from the children's sunburnt faces. He stood there for a moment, torn between reason and instinct. He was not a man known for charity. He lived by the rule that every person had to fight their own battles, the same rule that had built his ranch from dust and sweat. But watching this woman struggle to hold her children upright, something in him cracked open. Clara looked up at him again, eyes glassy, voice breaking. "Please, sir, take them somewhere safe. I can't," she bit back a sob. "I can't keep them alive anymore." Her words hit him harder than a bullet. He looked at the children once more, the boy's wary stare, the girl's fragile breathing, and then at their mother. She was on the edge of collapse, but her love burned like fire through her weakness. He exhaled slowly, the decision forming before he could stop it. "I'll take you too," he said. For a moment, silence reigned. The woman blinked, unsure if she'd heard right. "What?" "You heard me," Bo said, his voice firm now. "You and your children? You're coming with me." Clara's lips parted in disbelief. The tears she'd been holding back spilled freely now, cutting clean lines down her dusty cheeks. Bo bent down, lifted the little girl into his arms, and nodded for the boy to climb up. Then he helped Clara to her feet. She was lighter than he expected, trembling like a leaf. As he guided her toward the horse, the setting sun bathed them in gold, turning the harsh road soft for a fleeting moment. For the first time in weeks, Clara didn't feel alone. She didn't know this man or what awaited them, but as he lifted her onto the horse and took the reins, she felt something she hadn't in a long, long time. Hope. The road back to Callahan Ranch was long, winding through miles of parched plains and silent canyons. As the horse trotted steadily forward, Bo Callahan kept one arm firm around Clara to steady her in the saddle. In front of them, Eli clutched his little sister tightly, the girl's head resting against his chest. The only sounds were the rhythmic creak of leather and the soft breath of the horse. For the first time in days, Clara wasn't walking. Her legs no longer burned, but her mind raced. Every hoofbeat carried her farther from the world she'd known. Her husband's grave, their ruined farmhouse, the memory of fields once green. She wanted to feel relief, yet guilt gnawed at her chest. She'd meant only to save her children, not herself. She shifted slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, you don't have to take me. Just the children, please. I'll find my way." Bo glanced down at her, his face unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. "You can barely stand," he said quietly. "You wouldn't make it a mile before the sun finished what the hunger started." Clara said nothing. The truth stung because it was kind. Her eyes burned, and she turned her face away so he wouldn't see. Bo wasn't a man who acted on impulse. Every decision he'd ever made, from buying his first herd to building his ranch, had been calculated and coldly practical. But this time practicality didn't matter. Something about that woman and those children had cracked through his armor. Maybe it was the way the boy stood in front of her, ready to fight the world with nothing but courage. Maybe it was the way she'd asked him, not for herself, but for them. He'd spent years surrounded by wealth, yet nothing about it ever felt as pure as that moment. When the ranch finally came into view, the sun was setting low, painting the land in orange and gold. The vast expanse of Callahan Ranch stretched. Before them, white fences, a big red barn, and a two-story house that stood proud against the horizon. From a distance, it looked like salvation itself. The ranch hands noticed Beau's approach and hurried out, their chatter fading when they saw the strangers on his horse. Whispers spread fast, their boss, the hard and stoic Callahan, bringing home a woman and 2 starving children. It was a sight none could have imagined. Beau dismounted first, lifting the girl gently down. She was light as a feather, her small arms clinging around his neck before he set her on the ground. The boy followed, eyes wary but brave. Then he turned to help Clara, his large, calloused hands steadying her as she slid from the saddle. Her feet barely touched the earth before she stumbled, and he caught her easily. "Easy," he murmured. "You're safe now." The word safe hit her harder than she expected. It had been so long since she'd felt it, so long since she'd believed it was real. Beau led them toward the house where Martha, his longtime housekeeper, appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "Good heavens, Beau," she said, eyes wide. "Who are these poor souls?" "Get some food ready," Beau said curtly, "and a room made up." Martha, though surprised, didn't question him. One look at Clara and the children told her everything she needed to know. She hurried inside, her kind eyes softening as she passed them. Clara followed slowly, her children clutching her skirts. The smell of stew drifted from the kitchen, rich, warm, and almost too much to bear. She blinked hard, swallowing the lump in her throat. Behind her, Beau removed his hat, staring at the trio as they stepped into his home. A woman who had nothing, yet carried herself with quiet dignity even in rags. He didn't know what he was getting himself into. He only knew that turning them away would have been something he'd never forgive himself for. As night fell over the ranch, Beau stood on the porch, staring into the distance. The decision was made. They were his responsibility now, not out of pity, but out of something deeper he couldn't yet name. And somewhere inside that big, silent house, the faint laughter of children, small, tired, but real, rose for the first time in years. Morning came quietly over Callahan Ranch, the golden light spilling across the wide fields, catching the dust in slow drifting clouds. For the first time in a long while, the big house was not silent. There were small footsteps in the hallway, the sound of a wooden spoon clattering on the floor, and a child's shy giggle echoing faintly through the kitchen. Beau Callahan, who'd long been used to the stillness of solitude, noticed every sound. Sitting at the table with his coffee, he stared out the window as Eli, the boy, chased a barn cat across the yard, while Lila, his little sister, watched from the porch steps, clutching a worn doll Martha had mended overnight. Clara was in the kitchen, helping Martha wash dishes after breakfast. Her movements were careful, almost timid, as if she feared overstepping. The simple act of being inside a warm home, wearing clean clothes, and hearing her children laugh again, felt unreal, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. Martha, wise and watchful, broke the silence. "You're not the first lost soul Mr. Callahan's ever brought home," she said gently, drying a plate. "But you're the first he's kept." Clara paused, uncertain. "I don't aim to be a burden," she murmured, her hands trembling slightly as she stacked the dishes. "Child," Martha said kindly, "no one who helps ain't a burden." She gave a soft smile, her eyes full of warmth. "You just keep doing what you're doing. The ranch can use a bit of life again." Outside, Beau gave orders to the ranch hands, his deep voice carrying across the yard. He was a man who spoke little, but his presence commanded attention. The workers were used to his quiet authority, and none dared ask about the woman and children in the house. Still, their curious glances said enough. As the day stretched, on Clara worked wherever she could, mending old shirts, scrubbing the porch, helping Martha cook. She refused to sit idle, though her body still ached from weeks on the road. Each task steadied her hands. Each small act reminded her that she still had purpose. When she brought Beau a tray of food that evening, she hesitated at his door. He looked up from the papers on his desk, tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-worn skin and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. "You don't have to do that," he said. Martha handles meals. Clara lowered her gaze. I just wanted to thank you. For everything. Bo studied her for a long moment. Gratitude was rare in his world. Most people took what they could and asked for more. But this woman spoke as though he'd done her the greatest kindness in the world, when all he'd done was offer what any decent man should. He nodded once, his voice quiet. You're welcome, Mrs. Whitmore. Her lips parted slightly at the sound of her name. No one had called her that with respect since her husband died. That night, when Bo stepped out onto the porch, he saw Eli sitting on the steps with a blanket around his sister's shoulders. You're the man who saved my ma, the boy said bluntly, his small chin lifted. Bo smiled faintly. Your ma saved herself. I just gave her a horse to do it on. The boy grinned, a tooth missing on one side, and Bo felt something stir inside him, something like pride, or maybe peace. Inside the house, Clara stood by the window, watching them. The glow from the lantern cast a soft halo around Bo's frame, the same man who had found her broken on a road of dust and despair. For the first time since her husband's death, Clara allowed herself to breathe deeply, to feel the air fill her lungs without fear or pain. The ranch was quiet, not the silence of loneliness but of safety. The silence had changed. It no longer felt empty. It felt like home, waiting to be rebuilt. Weeks turned to months and the Callahan ranch began to breathe again. The air felt different, lighter somehow, less haunted by the echo of old solitude. For years, Bo Callahan's home had been orderly, efficient, and utterly lifeless. But with Clara Whitmore and her children there, something unseen began to shift. Where there had once been silence, there was now laughter, faint at first, like timid birdsong after a long winter. Lila's giggles filled the kitchen as Martha taught her to knead bread. Eli ran with the ranch hands, chasing chickens or trying to lasso fence posts with a rope too big for his hands. Even the ranch horses seemed livelier, their ears pricking up when the children came near. Clara, though still shy, worked tirelessly. She refused to let Bo's charity feel like debt. She mended clothes for the workers, cleaned the barn, and tended to the small garden near the porch. Her hands, though rough and scarred, were steady. Life returned to her eyes, a quiet strength replacing the fear that once clouded them. One afternoon, Bo found her out by the stable, sleeves rolled up, hands deep in mud as she struggled to help a heifer give birth. The ranch hand who'd been watching had panicked and run for help. But Clara had stayed, calm, firm, unflinching. Push, girl, she murmured to the struggling animal, her voice steady despite the sweat dripping down her brow. Bo arrived just in time to see her guide the calf into the world, wiping its nose gently with a cloth and whispering soft words of comfort. When the calf let out its first weak cry, Bo's chest tightened in quiet admiration. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen such courage. Not loud or boastful, but natural, instinctive. You handled that better than most men I've hired, he said. Stepping forward, Clara glanced up. Her cheeks flushed, hair sticking to her temples. Life doesn't stop for fear, Mr. Callahan, she replied softly. If it did, I'd have been gone a long time ago. Bo didn't answer. He only nodded, a gesture that meant more than words ever could. Later that evening, word of Clara's bravery spread across the ranch. The hands who had once eyed her with suspicion began tipping their hats when she passed. Even the most stubborn among them muttered that Miss Whitmore's got grit, but not everyone in town was so kind. At the general store a few weeks later, whispers followed Bo and Clara as they walked in together. That's her, someone murmured. The widow Callahan took in. A few chuckled, making remarks too crude to repeat. Bo ignored them at first, until one man, a rancher with too much whiskey in his breath, said, Careful, Callahan. Feed a stray long enough, she'll think she owns the place. The store went silent. Bo turned, his jaw set like stone. He stepped forward until the man shrank back beneath his glare. That woman, Bo said slowly, his voice cold and even, has more honor in her little finger than you've got in your whole damn body. No one dared speak after that. He paid for Clara's supplies, handed her the bag, and guided her out without another word. On the ride home, she sat behind him on the horse, quiet for a long time. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, You didn't have to do that. Bo's reply was simple. Yes, I did. When they reached the ranch, the children ran out to greet them, their laughter cutting through the evening air. Bo watched them, then looked back at Clara, the woman who had walked into his life broken and afraid, and who now carried herself with quiet grace and courage. For the first time in years, he realized something he hadn't dared admit. The ranch didn't just feel alive again. He did. Summer had settled warm and golden over the plains. The Callahan ranch thrived. The pastures were full, the cattle fat and strong, and laughter had become as natural a sound as the wind. Clara had found her rhythm in this new life. She rose before dawn, packed Eli's small lunches, brushed Lila's hair, and helped Martha with the daily chores. In the evenings, she'd hum old songs by the fire, her voice soft and steady while Bo sat nearby, pretending to read but listening all the same. He'd grown used to her presence, the way she brought peace without effort. But just as Bo began to believe the past could stay buried, the past found its way back. It came one hot afternoon when the sound of a wagon rolling up the drive broke the ranch's calm. Bo stepped out onto the porch, brow furrowed as a ragged man climbed down. His clothes were stained with dust and whiskey, his eyes sharp with trouble. "Bo Callahan," he drawled, hitching his thumb into his belt. "Heard you been playing hero to my kin." Clara froze in the doorway, the color draining from her face. "Hank," she whispered. The man turned toward her, a crooked grin spreading across his face. "Well, I'll be damned." Clara Whitmore, still breathing. "Didn't think you had it in you." Bo's gaze hardened. "You know this man?" She nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "My husband's brother, Hank Whitmore." Bo stepped off the porch, his boots crunching the gravel. "You've got business here, state it." Hank spat into the dirt. "I do. My brother's kids, see, Eli and Lila, they're blood, family. And word in town is you got 'em living high here, eating better than I am. Seems to me maybe I ought to take what's mine." Clara shook her head, clutching her apron. "You left us, Hank. You didn't care when we were starving," he sneered. "That was before I found out you were shacked up on the Callahan place. Folks in town say he's got a soft spot for you. Maybe even more than that." His eyes flicked toward Bo. "Guess pity pays better than marriage, huh?" The air went still. Bo's fists clenched, but his voice remained calm, too calm. "You're done talking now." Hank grinned wider. "Not yet, I ain't. You want me to disappear, Callahan? Fine, I'll do it, for a price." He leaned in, voice low and poisonous. "A few $100 ought to keep my mouth shut about your arrangement." Clara's heart sank. The shame she'd buried began to rise again, the fear of being seen as nothing more than a burden or charity case. Bo took a slow step forward, his eyes cold as steel. "You get off my land," he said evenly. "Now, you come near this ranch again, you won't walk away." Hank's grin faltered at the tone. He backed away, muttering curses, but Clara knew this wasn't the end. The look in his eyes as he climbed back into his wagon told her so. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the hallway felt like a threat, every creak in the floorboards a warning. She sat by her window, staring out at the moonlit fields, her heart heavy with dread. She thought of Hank's words, of the way Bo had defended her, and of the gossip already brewing in town. She couldn't bear the thought of bringing ruin to the man who had saved her, not after all he had done. As dawn crept across the horizon, she made up her mind. She would leave before the whispers reached him, before Hank's poison could stain what little peace they'd built. Quietly, she packed a small satchel, kissed her children's foreheads as they slept, and left a folded note on Bo's desk. "You gave us a home when we had none. I will never forget your kindness. But I can't be the reason people speak your name with shame. Take care of my children. They are better off with you. Clara." Then, with tears in her eyes, she slipped out into the pale morning light, walking the same lonely road where he had once found her. But this time, she was the one leaving behind everything she loved. The road stretched endlessly under the pale morning sky, the same dusty path Clara had walked countless times before, only now she carried the weight of hope and fear both. The satchel on her shoulder held nothing but a few scraps of clothing, a loaf of bread, and the small treasures of her children. But it felt heavier than any pack she had ever carried. Every step forward was a battle between her heart and her pride. She didn't hear the hooves at first. But then, a steady rhythm grew behind her, echoing across the plains. She turned briefly, squinting into the rising sun. Bo Callahan approached on his horse, moving with that same quiet authority that had first drawn her attention. Calm, unwavering, and impossibly determined. "Clara," he called, his voice carrying across the fields. She froze, unsure if she should turn. Her throat tightened. The words she had planned to say vanished into dust. Bo drew closer, reining in his horse a few yards away. His eyes, dark and unyielding, softened as they met hers. "You walk away again," he said slowly, his voice firm but gentle. "And they'll think I turned you out. You stay, and they'll know I meant what I said." Clara's fingers clenched the straps of her satchel. "Bo, I can't stay," she whispered. "I'll only bring trouble. I can't risk your reputation, and not for me, not for them. They'll think I'm a burden, a charity case." Her voice faltered and tears spilled down her dusty cheeks. "You're not a burden," Bo said, stepping off his horse. He moved closer, the heat of the morning sun glinting off his leather vest. "You never were. You and those children belong here, not because I have to take care of you, but because I want to." Clara shook her head, her lips trembling. "I can't ask you for that," she said. "I've already taken so much. My past, it's full of mistakes. I don't want them to reflect on you." Bo knelt slightly to meet her gaze, his eyes never leaving hers. "Clara Whitmore, you've done nothing but fight for those kids every single day. You've kept them alive where the world wanted to see them fall. That strength, that courage, that's not a burden. That's worth more than anything I own." Her heart skipped and she took a step back, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Bo's words pierced through the fear and shame she'd carried for so long, cutting to the raw truth she had tried to deny. She deserved to belong, and so did her children. The wind stirred the dust at their feet, carrying the faint scent of the ranch, hay, leather, and the faint trace of fresh bread. Clara realized with a sudden clarity that leaving would not save anyone. It would only leave them empty, apart from the man who had offered not pity but something far rarer: respect, safety, and a chance at life. She began, then faltered. Her voice caught in her throat. Bo reached out gently, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You don't have to say it," he said. "Just stay." Clara's tears flowed freely now, unashamed and unguarded. I'll stay," she whispered, a small, shaky smile forming. "For them. For us." Bo held out his hand. Tentatively, she placed hers in his. They walked side by side toward the ranch, the children running ahead, unaware of the weight their mother had just lifted from her own heart. As the sun rose higher, it cast the fields in golden light. Clara realized that at last, they were no longer fleeing from a past filled with pain. They were walking toward something greater, a family forged not from necessity, but from love and choice. And for the first time in months, Clara allowed herself to hope. The ranch had changed. The fences gleamed white in the sun, the cattle grazed in lush pastures, and the house, once quiet and austere, now hummed with life. Clara moved through it with ease, carrying breakfast to the children, tending to the garden, and helping Martha prepare the day's work. The air smelled of fresh bread, hay, and sun-warmed earth, a world away from the dust and despair of the road that had once nearly claimed her family. Eli and Lila ran barefoot across the yard, laughing freely as they chased the horses. Bo watched them from the porch, a rare softness in his usually stern eyes. The children had found their place, their innocence restored by warmth, food, and love. And now, Clara had too. It had been months since that fateful day on the road, and the bond between Bo and Clara had grown quietly, steadily. There had been no grand declarations at first, only small gestures. A hand offered to steady her while carrying firewood, a nod of approval for a job well done, a look lingering just a moment too long. Over time, the respect between them deepened into trust, trust into affection, and affection into love. One warm evening, as the sun began to dip behind the distant hills, Bo approached Clara in the garden. The children were playing nearby, their laughter carrying across the fields. Bo removed his hat, tucking it under his arm, and looked at her with the intensity she had come to recognize as his honesty. "Clara," he said, his voice low and steady, "I've been thinking. All of it, it's more than I expected, but it feels right. You and the children belong here, and He paused, taking a deep breath. "I want you here with me for always." Clara's heart swelled. She had imagined moments like this, but reality, Beau's hand reaching for hers, his gaze unwavering, was far more overwhelming than any dream. She nodded, tears spilling over, and whispered, "I want that too." A week later, beneath the wide-open sky and the warmth of summer, they were married in a simple ceremony behind the barn. Martha officiated, while the ranch hands looked on, their expressions a mixture of awe and respect. Beau and Clara exchanged vows not of grandeur, but of honesty and devotion, promises to protect, nurture, and honor one another and the family they had become. The children beamed, hanging tiny bouquets of wildflowers around the couple's necks. Eli's grin was wide and mischievous. Lila's eyes sparkled with wonder. They had found not just safety, but love, stability, and a family forged through hardship and care. As the ceremony ended, the family stood together on the porch, the golden light of sunset painting the fields in shades of amber and rose. Clara rested her head against Beau's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his hand holding hers. The children pressed close, their laughter mingling with the soft sigh of the evening breeze. Beau glanced out over the ranch, pastures, barns, and open skies, and felt something he hadn't in years: peace. Not just for himself, but for the family he had chosen and who had chosen him in return. The trials of the past, the hunger, the fear, the whispers of the world had all led to this, a beginning that was stronger and brighter because it had been earned. Clara looked up at him, smiling through her tears. "We're home," she whispered. "Yes," Beau replied, his voice deep with certainty, "and we always will be." The sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the ranch in a warm, lingering glow. Together they stood, a mother, a father, and two children who had once known despair, now surrounded by love and hope. The dust of the past settled behind them, leaving only a new beginning, a family bound not by circumstance but by choice, courage, and unwavering heart. And in the quiet of the evening, with the wind carrying the scent of hay and wildflowers, the Callahan Ranch finally felt like home.